system, building stability from code to community. We grow reliability. Welcome to QA Roots. Roots of quality, testing the system, building stability from code to community.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the new episode of the QA Roots Africa podcast. Today, I'm very excited to have with us Amos Njoroge, if I pronounce the name correct. We try to agree on the name, and hopefully it's correctly pronounced. So, Amos, very nice. Thank you for that. Very nice to have you in the podcast. So, Amos is originally from Kenya and is currently living in the Netherlands. To give a little bit of context, he is an experienced senior quality assurance engineer. He has a strong background. He lived in different countries, and he have worked for many, many years in the information technology and service industry. So, Amos, thank you very much, and welcome to the QA Roots podcast. I'm so happy to have you on board.
Thank you, Leonard, and thanks for that nice introduction.
Cool. So, Amos, my first question to you is: can you please share your journey in quality engineering and what made you decide to go into QE?
Yeah. So I'll be lying if I said I had planned all along to be an QA. So this idea came by accident. So I just give you a background on how I got into QA. So I got it straight out of university. So as most of the people, you go to university, that's the most, in many people, a few people know what they want to do in life, but most of majority are trying to figure out what they're going to do in life. So unfortunately, it was like a 5-year course, so it was very long. So after the 5 years, around 2011, finished the course, but there was a delay in terms of releasing or doing the graduation. So a friend of mine and myself were like, okay, it's either because the university was in the city, it's either go back home or just find something to do. Fortunately, within Kenya, that's when internet access was really coming up. And we were able to look into the internet and try to find what was happening. And then these freelance platforms were coming up. So we had Odesk, which I think later transitioned to Upwork. So it was very easy. The barrier to entry is just create an account, look for jobs, and that's how we got into testing. Testing also has a low barrier to entry, but it's a misconception that it's easy to do QA because as you find out, it's not only just testing the application, it's understanding the application that you're testing from what is the business logic, what are you trying ideally to automate. But it was easy for us to start just get an application and start just testing it. So that's how I got into it. So got some few jobs, got some good money, and I stuck. But eventually I got to understand what the industry is about, the profession is about, and what makes a quality QA engineer, and I think that's what we're going to discuss. But in essence, that's how I got into QA.
That's a very interesting story. Yeah. I see often this common pattern that for a lot of people it was not meant to be, but it was sort of a accidental joining the quality engineer. But then the good news is a lot of people then are very happy and remain into that.
And the way I see it, I don't know if I could put it like this, because the QA itself, even in many organizations, is an afterthought, right? So they are thinking about developing an application, but at the end of it, they say, okay, we need this tested. We did not thought of this at the beginning.
Yeah.
Automated. So it's not only in people, it has not been defined as a career that you can follow in a certain way, but most people got into it by accident, and even most businesses realize it's useful by accident when they have an incident.
Yeah, that is so. I absolutely again relate to that. Amos, obviously, I know that you have lived in different countries. And I would like to know a little bit more your stories throughout the different countries where you lived, and also as you work, obviously, in quality assurance in different countries. If you can perhaps tell me a little bit more the differences that you've seen throughout your journey in the way software testing is done in different countries.
Yeah. So my context, as I said, is starting from very unstructured and up to where I am. I think it's a more structured way. So when I started, it was like, as you know, most of these freelance opportunities is just get maybe a 2 days, 3 days kind of fixed contract, do the testing. In most cases, even going through read the documentation is not, you don't have enough time. So in majority of my time, it was like that. And at the tail end of my manual testing, I got into this American company where we would like test, do like 200 test cases on, because it's a very major application. Every person was given a set of test cases that you could automate daily. In that scenario, yes, the more you get to test the application intuitively and not explicitly, you get to understand what the application is about. You get to know what is it that ideally this application that has been built, what is it trying to process? What's it going to try to automate? So you start from what are the inputs, what are the outputs, and you try to verify that these outputs are what is expected from the specs. But now the specs are you're reading from the test cases themselves, not from get a spec document and at the beginning start to understand what the spec is about, internalize that specs, and then once the application is developed, try to validate that specs is what has been tested. So this was like more an informal setup. Then at the middle of my career, I got to work with a startup. And with a startup, I was very fortunate because they gave me the freedom to even question some of the requirements. So I got to start understanding what is the software development lifecycle from the requirements themselves, how the requirements structured, how as a QA should I consume those requirements, and then from those requirements, how should I validate that the application has been implemented according to those requirements? So this gave me that skill to try and consume these kind of documents, understand the application, and understand the life cycle of the application. If we are talking about sprints in this case, you know what's going to be tested, how it's going to be deployed, and how I'm going to test it. This startup was based in Europe, so that's why I transitioned from US into Europe. And now in the startup itself, as I indicated, it gave me this aspect of how the Europeans need the applications to be tested, and I was introduced to that spec. And then when I was working with the startup, I decided to join TopTal. And TopTal, as you know, is an agency that seconds candidates to different clients. So my first client that I dealt with was Swiss Re. Unfortunately, that's the only client I worked with TopTal, because eventually they decided to internalize me. And within Swiss Re, which I was now positioned in IPTQ, which is like a division within Swiss Re itself that deals with an insurance application on an insurance platform. I got to understand the full software life cycle, from doing the specs themselves, from doing sprint planning, and from the sprint planning itself, interacting with DOs, which are the product owners, understanding within that time, time within the sprint planning, which of these specs that are required to be delivered and what timelines need to be delivered. And then within those timelines, then be able to go and verify that this has been implemented in the right way. So I've had this journey from a very unstructured kind of setup where one day you're testing this application, the next day you're testing a mobile application, the other day you even testing some hardwares remotely, up to a very structured lifestyle application development. Yeah.
Perfect. Could you see also some different approaches in the way the meaning of quality engineering it's done? Something like, I don't know, in certain countries they really care about this, and perhaps in Europe about something else. Could you spot anything like that?
So my experience basically has been through those two markets, the US and
yeah.
In most cases, in the US, it's all about delivery. So complete this kind of set of test cases, and you can take it as the way I saw it as a assembly line within a manufacturing system. You are guided within a certain workstation. Yours is just to look at the quality of the product and then push it over to the next person. So that was the setup. I don't know if it's the whole of the US, but most of the companies that I worked were like that. Just test your application, then leave it to the next person to do their own job. Now, in both of the startup and APTQ where I'm working on, it's more like rounded as a team. You're able to understand what is expected, what you want to deliver. So you already have a vision of what is expected. So by the time you're coming to deliver it, you have an idea of what needs to be delivered. So you have the full software lifecycle within your context, and you're able to test it like that. So those are the two differences I have imagined. Unfortunately, I did not get to work with Kenyan companies because once I got into this remote kind of work, I was fully remote. So most of the interaction I got with is maybe personal projects or probably people who were developing these applications. But most of them in Kenya are also doing remote work.
Okay, perfect. I get it, and yes, I think it's very interesting, the what you mentioned about in the US approach, you're more like, an element of a pipeline delivering something. What in your experience in the European companies, you had more like a team attitude and, more like rather than being the ETH element of a chain, you were more like a contributor taking care of the quality.
They really loved this aspect of. I think Toyota introduced it. I think there's an assembly line. They have a book about how from one point to another, and they think that is efficiency. Sometimes, I think in software development is somehow different. We are not doing like dealing with components. Yes, we're dealing with. There's a whole aspect of context behind it.
Yeah, no, I totally get it. And I really believe, there is a team component and talking to people rather than being an elemental.
Fact. So.
Yeah. So you obviously you mentioned to me you leave Kenya as far as I've understood relatively early in your life. So obviously you don't have a lot of contact with Kenya anymore. But in your vision, in your understanding, as far as you're concerned, are there elements that would define quality engineering in Africa that you think they could be different than the way, for instance, it's done in the States or in Europe? I was thinking maybe in relationship to the infrastructure or the different type of population or the language or the availability of devices. Do you think that quality engineering could have considered different aspects because of this?
So I'll talk as a consumer basically of the application rather than probably on the other end of the development. So maybe 15 years ago, probably in terms of Kenya, because within that time, when I was starting is when the internet, as I told you, I got to access to internet and remote work through the availability of the infrastructure. And then many people did not have access to internet and even access to smartphones. Therefore, many people don't understand. I think they call it USSD. There's this application that you use, the text-based like application. They come through the network where you have like to add key in a number and you're able to get a menu of options that you can use to send. And a good example is the M-Pesa. So many people consumed M-Pesa through the USSD. So you just enter a number, it gives you a menu of just text. And then you're able to, if you want to send somebody, just select send, add the number, and that's it. So from that aspect, you can see most of the people who are consuming that application, because at the end of the day, there's automation behind it, will consume it via this text model. So how do you validate this in this case? So the UI doesn't become very important, but maybe the contract between the backend and the database and all that becomes very important. So the testing is in terms of how fast is this transaction going to be processed, because in this case, being a financial application, it needs to be very fast. So the testing in that case is different. But over time, I believe the availability of internet and the infrastructure has made it in such a way that we have even these smartphones available, and most of the applications now are mobile applications. Even the M-Pesa, you rarely see somebody using the SSD. They have like mobile applications. And therefore, in this case, then there's this universality in terms of the applications that are developed and consumed in Kenya, and also developed and consumed in maybe Western world. The trend is going that Even if you see it's like AI right now, everybody who is consuming AI in the West is the same person consuming AI in Africa. There can be nuances in terms of the cultural differences, but in terms of how they consume it, they're consuming it the same. If it's in terms of the tokens, it's the same way. So if you're going to test, you're going to test it from that aspect. But the only the nuances is in terms of the cultural ones, but they don't. I think technology is an equalizer and it brings this new whole culture, right? Besides the geographical culture.
Okay. That's a very interesting take, Amos. And it's really fascinating also that when you talk about AI, it's sort of a global phenomenon that no matter if it's, the West, the East, Africa, or whatever, it's basically I shouldn't say affecting, I should say improving, hopefully the life of people in a similar way.
Yeah.
Which actually this leads me to my next question. I was also, this something that could be interesting for the audience is how I met Amos the first time was at the Swiss testing days a few weeks ago there was a very beautiful testing venue, test conference in Zurich, and Amos was presenting an amazing, and here correct me if I'm wrong, AI solution that was used that Amos is using in his company for the testing. So my next question for you, Amos, is what is the impact of artificial intelligence in quality engineering in your vision? Or perhaps you can even say, how do you use AI in your daily work in quality engineering?
Yeah. So lately you've heard how many people have like the apocalyptic thing about software development is dead and all that. Yeah. It's from my take is it has tremendously improved how we test and how we approach, especially on automation. But also it has cemented our usefulness under the value that we're going to offer applications that are going to be developed. So let me qualify it first in terms of how it has helped me, because everybody will be honest, a year ago, how we write and how we develop software has ideally changed for everyone. There's nobody who is not using an IDE that is AI enabled. And even for my case, now I'm writing the test case that is going to automate something is no longer an issue. I'm not going to deal with syntaxes and everything. Writing a quality test case that is going to test the correct thing has been the issue, because I no longer going to look for the syntax of the tool, what is new with the tool to help me automate something, but is understanding what is required for me within this context of this feature to test. What is most important? Because if you throw that to the AI, it will give you so many test cases. A lot of them may be repeated, but what is the core feature that I'm required to test in it? Um, the the part that has really helped us with AI is, as anybody who knows automation, is that even before creating the automated test case is not the problem. The problem is when they fail. So when they fail, that's when you have to do the manual work in debugging, in trying to identify what failed. And then after identifying what has failed, how do you communicate this information in a more quality way for the developer, so that the developer does not go and redo what you did, and they have like contact with quality logged bugs, and give them a head start to start figuring what's the issue with the application. So within our organization, as every other organization is trying to see which use cases can AI help us automate, where does it improve our quality of life as in the organization. And when we identified this aspect of analyzing our test cases, we have a bunch of test suite, and every time they fail, we need to understand what has failed, read the logs and everything. And we saw, because this is context that has been bound, AI can easily analyze this context, these failures. It has more knowledge in terms of even the application, because I am testing from a black box point of view. My reports have been generated from a black point of view, but it can be able to correlate between the report and the application and the logic within the application. So we created an automation agent we called a pipeline analyzer, which runs within GitLab. And anytime there is a failure, it's able to automatically start analyzing our test results. And from there, try to find the root cause for the error. And at the end of it, give us a report that we could either validate that that's a correct report if it has hallucinated, because at the beginning it was a bit hallucinating. Some of these models are not that good.
Classic.
But once it generates the report, in most of the cases, even with the higher models right now, it's on point in terms of what the issue is. Even sometimes you have to even to prompt it on the code itself, and I'm excited to and even understand what the code is doing, even if maybe I'm not a Java developer. As a QA and as automation, I'm able to at least have an insight of what the issue is. And in most cases, the bugs that now we give to the developers, in most cases, the developers are now second guessing what the issue is.
Yeah.
Sometimes we have a love-hate relationship with the developers, right? Anybody would know. But
True.
in most cases now, what I've known is the developer rarely second guesses, and it really helps us. It has really improved on how we are using it. Now, there's this other aspect of how it's going to shape on how we're going to go do testing. So right now, and everybody, me included, has, because I'm excited, I have tried to create an application that I wanted to create for so many years, but I didn't have probably the expertise to do it.
Yeah.
But most of the people do not have the software fundamentals to understand. Yes, the applications told me it has written a full file of logic and what is supposed to do. But what are software fundamentals within that code that it has generated, so that it can try, because at the end of the day, we are trying to automate a process or add value through automation, right? That has not changed. All software application do is help automate a certain process. So the processes are still there. It's the barrier to now coding that process and automating that process that has been reduced. Unfortunately, the software fundamentals are still there. They are not going to change. So many people feel this false sense of, now I can create the application, I can throw it out there, and people can start doing it. But before you throw it to the other people, that's where we come in as QAs to test it. Manual testing right now is very important, because even the agents that are being created, because also the software that is going to be developed is also changing, because becoming non-deterministic in a way. How do we also try to test that and make sure that the product at the end of the day that's going to be released is of good quality? So we are still going to be here for a very long time.
Yeah, I think this is a very also good answer to the, very common question is will AI replace our jobs? Obviously, it's hard to provide a, full answer for the future because things change every day. But for sure, I agree with you that, this tendency of vibe coding by people that, all of us, we all have that dream thing that we would love to build. And before AI, we're like, I can't do that because I would need to be a developer. Now, this democratizes the fact that everybody can build apps, which is on one side amazing. On the other, as to your point, the risk of creating uncontrolled software that on the surface looks incredible, but when put in reality, it can crack. Because I find it funny that when I'm developing stuff for fun, I tend to forget my QAs. I want to be gentle with my little baby because I created a product. We do, and I agree with you, more than ever, we need QA. We even need manual stuff to prove things with our senses, our eyes, our hands, and make sure that they really work the way the customers would use them. And this brings enormous value. And I think companies start to realize how true this is when you open LinkedIn or newspaper and you see things like whatever technology AI deleted my prod DB and things like that. So obviously, I don't think QA could have avoided that, but keeping QA in the way that we control what the AI builds brings immense value.
And it's a good thing about sometimes forgetting we are QAs, because I also had the same situation. I tried to code one of my toy projects. I did it 3 times. And the only time that time it somehow worked is because I went to this thing they're called spec development, which is also at the same time trying to limit the AI from running away with the specs, and also adding some testing to it. That's the only way I was able to control it, right? So I went my roots and having the skills to understand this is how these features should be tested and all that. I ideally controlled how it's going to be developed, and at least something very nice came out of it. But that's emphasizes the point that we still need QA. We still need even the developers that are going to develop. They need a QA mindset of how the application should behave, how application should be tested, because sometimes you're very excited into just automating stuff, and then we forget that at the end of the day, this needs to scale, this needs to work in a certain way.
Yeah.
We need to slow
Yeah.
down.
I love when people say, AI is incredible to go from 0 to 40%, from an idea to a working proof of concept, perfection. But then, the step from bringing the proof of concept into a viable real product, there is a lot of manual work, and we as the quality engineers, we can provide you huge value. So I absolutely 100% agree with what you say. One last question, Amos, is what would be an advice you will give? Think of a younger yourself, a baby version of yourself, or in general, a new developer. Let's say somebody in Africa or in Kenya that is willing to go into accidentally or not quality engineering. What would be an advice you would give this person?
Yeah, find a path and stick to it. Sometimes, and this is everything even into life. Sometimes we, as the example I was telling you, you start vibe coding an application and run so many times, and okay, I should have defined a path and stuck to that path. Because in most cases, to be honest, when I started off, I was not sure I should do this QA for a long time. But even with now the availability of AI, it's very easy to create a path that you want to do it and stick to it. And there's a lot of even information right now. If I want to learn about a topic, even if the topic was very complex, right now we have the tools to make it as easily consumable as possible. So stick to that path. There's a lot of information that you can use, and don't be scared about where the AI is going. The way I see it is just like the industrial revolution, the automation revolution, the .com boom. These all are automation. We are trying to be better, but these create opportunities. And when you're in the right path and you're in the right spot, and you're currently whatever is happening, you always find the opportunity and yourself meeting at a certain point. So for any QA who is starting, don't give up. Stick to that path. QA will always be here. You go to the medical field, you go to any other field, there's an aspect of QA. Anywhere there is product that's been developed that's going to be consumed, we need quality assurance, and therefore will always be available. And yeah, that's the only thing.
Yeah, I love your advice. Well said. Amos, what is the best way to reach out to you?
So the best and easiest way is just via LinkedIn. So you can find me on LinkedIn and we can connect there.
And yeah, the LinkedIn page will be in the captions of these podcasts, so people can easily click on the link and reach out to you.
Yeah.
Excellent, Amos. We made a podcast. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, it's my first. Yeah, I think it's good to share out what my experience is. It's the first time I'm sharing to people, so I hope people they will resonate with my story, and somebody will also have also see themselves in what we have done.
Yeah,
But
I'm
it's
sure you will be of inspiration for a lot of people. And
Yes.
thank you so much, Amos, for being part of the QA Roots podcast,
Yeah.
and wishing you all the best. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye.